The big issue with COP21 is we need, as long as fossil fuels appear to be the cheapest energy to the public, we're not going to phase down their use. So we've got to get an agreement between the major powers to have a rising carbon fee or a carbon tax. Without that, we can be sure that emissions are actually going to continue to go up. I mean, it's very nice that all the nations have agreed that climate change really is a problem, but we also then need policies that will work to phase us off fossil fuels. And that's not going to be easy. Right now, fossil fuels appear to be the cheapest energy, and there are still countries that need a lot more energy if they're going to raise their people out of poverty. So that's the major issue, that we have to have energy, but it needs to be carbon free. It's a big challenge. Well, yeah, I think that in the next few years, because we're already at a point where it's very dangerous that we could pass a point of no return where the ocean is getting warmer. The biggest threat to the planet, to young people, is the stability of the ice sheets. Because if we allow the Antarctic ice sheets to go unstable, they will result in sea level rise of several meters. That means loss of practically all coastal cities. And more than half of the world's large cities are located on coastlines. So the economic consequences of that are incalculable. And the number of refugees that you would have would be in the hundreds of millions. So it dwarfs anything that we've faced so far in refugee crises. So we can't let that happen. But in order to avoid that, we're going to have to reduce carbon dioxide emissions rapidly. And that's simply not going to happen without making the price of fossil fuels honest. Right now, the costs of air pollution and water pollution from fossil fuels are not included in their price. So we're going to, and you can't suddenly increase the price of fossil fuels. You have to do this gradually. So I argue that what we need to do is have an agreement between major powers to have a gradually increasing carbon fee or carbon tax. And even if just China and the United States would agree to do that, they could make it a near global in practice, because they would put border duties on products from countries that do not have an equivalent carbon fee, and that would be a huge incentive for other countries to have an equivalent carbon fee. And that way we could phase down fossil fuel use and phase in clean energies and energy efficiency. But in addition, what we've realized is we've actually passed the point at which the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere now, if you leave it there indefinitely, is going to cause major problems, including sea level rise of several meters. So we're actually going to have to store some of the CO2 that's in the atmosphere now in the soil and biosphere. And that's where cooperation from developing countries will be needed. We will need to provide resources to developing countries to both improve agricultural and forestry practices so that more carbon is stored in the biosphere and in the soil. And actually, that shouldn't be too hard to get cooperation, because it's in the benefit of those countries as well as the benefit of the world to improve the fertility of the soil and to retain the benefits of the forests. So it's possible to solve this problem, but only if we take it seriously and begin to take the actions very soon. We have to take advantage of the potential of nuclear energy. Particularly, just look at China and India. Look at their coal emissions. Enormous. We can obtain some benefit from renewables and energy efficiency, but they must have large amounts of energy. If they're going to raise the people out of poverty, they need a lot of energy. And the only alternative to fossil fuels right now for baseload electric power is nuclear energy. And we know how to do nuclear power in much better ways than the 50-year-old technology that's in use in most Western countries now. So we should really be helping. In effect, Europe and the United States burned not only their share of the carbon budget, but much of the share of the rest of the world, India and China, for example. So we have some obligation to help them find the energy that they need to increase their standards of living. And at this time, we don't have an alternative for baseload electric power. Renewables are fine, and they're part of the solution for energy requirements, but they are intermittent, and they are frankly expensive. So we're going to need to find nuclear technology which is less expensive than the old generation nuclear that's used in the United States and Europe and Japan. We're going to need to have designs for the nuclear plants which can be reproduced easily. So you make modular reactors where you make the components in a factory and just assemble them on the sites. So we know how to do that, but we have put that on the back burner and put all of our emphasis on renewables, which I think it's great that we are trying very hard to do the best that we can with renewables, but we also have to do the other things that otherwise we're just not going to get there fast enough.
Presidential candidate Bernie Sanders, since the start of his campaign, has said that climate change is the United States' largest national security threat. Would you agree with that?
Well, Bernie Sanders is right that climate change is the biggest threat to young people. But we also need, and he says some other things that are right. He's against fracking. I think that's an appropriate position to take because there's a lot of carbon in gas. Coal is not the only big source of CO2. There's a tremendous amount of gas in the ground, and unfortunately, we can't burn that unless we were to capture the CO2 and put it back in the ground, and that simply makes it very expensive, and nobody's doing that. So we're going to need alternative clean energies, and that's where we're falling short. We have not put the research and development into all of the potential sources for clean energy. The young generation needs to recognize what the situation is, because the old generation is handing them a situation which is very soon going to be out of their control. If we allow emissions to continue to increase, then we practically guarantee that the ocean is going to continue to get warmer and the ice sheets will go unstable and we will get multi-meter sea level rise, which is a disaster which we have to avoid. That means we're going to have to find ways to phase down carbon emissions rapidly. And as long as fossil fuels are allowed to be the cheapest energy, or to appear to the user to be the cheapest energy, you can't solve the problem. So we've got to get a rising fee or tax on carbon emissions. And the only way the public will accept that is if the money that is collected from the fossil fuel companies is distributed to the public. If the money goes to the government, then the public will see the price of gasoline at the pump is going up, and they simply won't allow the tax to get high enough to phase out fossil fuels. But if you give the money to the public, an equal amount to all legal residents of a country, then most people would come out ahead, and they would be okay with a continuing increase in the carbon fee. And the important thing about that is that the economies are actually stimulated by such an approach. It is the way that you would move your technology to clean energy technology and to do it as rapidly as possible. Yeah, there's a huge challenge in trying to get the young people to understand this because the airwaves in the United States and frankly in other Western countries tend to be dominated by the fossil fuels perspective. In the United States, there's something called the I am an energy voter. If you turn on your television, you see this every day. Every hour you see these advertisements, and they're very persuasive. They're put together by professional communicators, and they try to persuade the public that it's in the best interests of the public to develop all the fossil fuels that we have. You know, they say this creates jobs, it makes the United States energy independent. It sounds very good to the public. Unfortunately, young people are then left holding the problems, and that's what has to be understood by young people. If you allow the fossil fuel industry to continue to determine national and international policies, then we're soon going to be in a situation where you cannot solve the problem. It will be a climate system out of our control. Yeah, it's difficult. You know, climate changes slowly over decadal timescales. Weather fluctuates on a day-to-day basis by tens of degrees, so you don't easily see the changing climate. But the science is now crystal clear. You know, it's a very simple phenomenon. When you add more CO2 or other greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, it's like putting a blanket on the planet. So it reduces the heat radiation to space. That makes the planet out of energy balance. There's more energy coming in from the sun than heat being radiated to space. And so, where is that energy going? It's going into the ocean because the atmosphere is thin, it doesn't have much heat capacity. Most of that energy is going into the ocean. So we can see what's happening, and we can look at the Earth's history. We know as the ocean gets warmer, it melts the ice that borders on the oceans and ends up causing large changes in sea level. Unfortunately, civilization developed in an era with stable sea level, and we've built our largest cities on coastlines. The economic implications of losing those cities would be enormous. So we really can't let that happen. And yet we're on a path where it's going to happen unless we get some dramatic changes in policies. Well, in fact, the young generation has tremendous potential for getting changes. You know, I remember I was speaking at a university in 2008 when the young people got excited about the Democratic candidate, Barack Obama. And in fact, they had the biggest impact on getting him elected. Everyone thought that Hillary Clinton had it sewed up, but the young people were in favor of Barack Obama, and they managed to get him to win the primaries in many states because they know how to use social media. They know how to get the message out. And even without significant funding, they were able to have a huge impact on the 2008 election. The problem was that when Obama was elected, he said the right words about a planet in peril, but he didn't take this as a first-order objective of his administration after he became president. That, as a result, we did not get the fundamental changes that we need in order to replace fossil fuels as our main energy source. He would have had to start out when he had control of both houses of Congress and he had 70% popularity. He should have spoken to the public and said, Well, we're going to have to put up with rising prices at the pump because we're going to need to move to clean energies. And if this had been done in a way that's economically sensible, namely increasing the price by collecting a fee from fossil fuel companies but giving the money to the public, it actually would have allowed us to move to clean energies. But that didn't happen. So we're going to have to start over and see that it happens soon. Otherwise, it's going to be too late.